Let's set up a Clark MIG welder. You'll need 2 crescent wrenches, a Phillips screwdriver, and some Teflon pipe sealing tape. Move the welder's side panel. Inside you'll find an accessories package, a roll of 23/1000 wire, and a face mask. A 2-gauge regulator is packed in the welder's box. First, put on the rubber feet. Tip the welder on its side and attach them. The feet protect the top of your workbench and improve airflow around the welder. Now you can install the wire. The welder comes with a smaller roll of wire. We'll be installing a larger 11-pound roll of wire, so you'll need to use this adapter. With either roll you use, be sure you don't over-tighten the butterfly nut. If it's too tight, the wire won't feed correctly. Guide the wire through the tube, about 6 inches past the tension device. Then adjust the tension device. Again, get it snug, but don't over-tighten. It only takes a couple of turns of the knob. Plug the welder into a standard 110-volt, 20-amp circuit. Switch on the power. Hold the torch straight out. Press the trigger to begin feeding the wire. If the wire slips, tighten the tension device a bit. Feed the wire until it appears at the end of the torch. When the wire appears, release the trigger and switch off the power. Now, take a look at the accessories and find this adapter fitting. You'll use this fitting to connect the welder to the 2-gauge regulator. First, wrap 2 turns of the Teflon tape around the threads on the regulator. Then connect the fitting. Tighten it until it's snug. Now you can attach the regulator to the refillable gas cylinder. Then turn the knob on the regulator all the way out. This cylinder is filled with gas used for mild steel or cast iron, a mixture of 75% argon and 25% carbon dioxide. Now adjust the gas flow at the regulator. Open the valve on the cylinder. Then press the trigger on the torch. Turn the adjustment knob until this gauge reads 2 to 4 cubic feet per hour. Next, check the adapter fitting for leaks. You'll use a leak detection fluid or some soapy water to do this. If you see some bubbles, the fitting is leaking. Take it apart and wrap a couple more turns of Teflon tape around the threads and retighten. Now we're ready to tune the welder. Turn the wire speed control to at least 5 on the 0 to 10 scale. To begin, you want the wire speed to be fast enough so it doesn't weld the tip shut. Fasten the ground clamp to a piece of scrap steel, any thickness, and switch the power on. You'll see that the wire is only live when you pull the trigger. You can always lay the torch down safely. Strike a weld. It will spit and sputter because the wire speed is probably too fast. So slowly turn down the wire speed control with your other hand. It will spit less and less. And when you hear a sound like frying bacon, it's adjusted. Listen. If you're having problems tuning the welder, check for a draft, or check the steel to see if it's contaminated with rust or grease. Once you've got your MIG welder adjusted, using it is easy. Just following a few simple techniques will give you fast, clean welds every time. First, use a steel wire brush to clean the area to be welded. This will remove any contamination on the steel. And it makes sure you'll get a good connection between the ground clamp and the metal you're welding. Always hold the welding tip at a 45-degree angle to the metal and keep it about a 1/4 inch away. Don't try to weld in a drafty place. You'll get a weak and dirty weld. But remember, MIG welding releases toxic gases, so don't weld in a small, closed space. Since the torch on the Clark MIG welder is so easy to use, you'll be able to weld forward, backward, and even vertically, whatever you need to do. We've been talking about welding mild steel with the MIG welder. What about welding a metal that's a little more exotic, like aluminum? First, you'll need to install the wire. You'll be using 30 thousandths aluminum wire. When installing the aluminum wire, remember, don't over-tighten the butterfly nut or the drive roller tension device. Next, check the contact tip at the end of the torch. Make sure it's the proper tip for the size of the wire you're using. Now you'll need to change the refillable gas cylinder. For welding aluminum, you'll need a gas cylinder filled with 100% argon. Attach the regulator to the new gas cylinder and open the valve. You'll need to readjust the regulator flow to between 4 and 6 cubic feet per hour. Every piece of aluminum has a thin layer of aluminum oxide on its surface. This oxide has to be taken off before you weld. Wash the piece with an acid-based cleaner made specially for taking off this aluminum oxide. Then, preheat the aluminum with a propane torch. Don't use an acetylene torch. It will contaminate the metal. You'll know the aluminum is ready to weld when a drop of water beads and rolls off the surface. As you're welding, remember, aluminum requires a faster wire speed, and you'll need to lay your weld much faster than mild steel. Now let's talk about Clark's line of combination flux core and MIG welders. Flux core welding is similar to MIG welding, except you don't need a separate shielding gas. Instead, you use a steel wire called flux core that produces its own gas as you weld. This means it's easier to weld outside or in drafty places. To weld other metals, like aluminum, stainless steel, or cast iron, you'll use a gas cylinder with the regulator and convert this welder to MIG welding. Setting up a flux core welder is a lot like setting up a MIG welder, except there's no gas cylinder to worry about. You'll need 2 crescent wrenches and a Phillips screwdriver. First, take out all the parts and lay them out on your workbench. Install the flux core wire. Straighten out the first few inches and guide the wire through the tube. Take a close look at the drive roller. It's different on this machine. One side of the roller is ridged for flux core wire, and the other side is smooth for MIG welding. Make sure you're using the ridged side for flux core welding. Adjust the tension device, don't over-tighten. Switch the power on. Hold the torch straight out. Make sure the hose is as straight as possible. Flux core wire is very stiff, so it's important to keep the hose as straight as you can. Feed the wire until it appears at the end of the torch. Tune the welder the same as you did before. Now you're ready to begin welding. When you use flux core wire to weld mild steel, you'll notice the welds aren't as clean as if you'd used a MIG welder for the same job. You'll want to convert the welder to MIG for any fine welding work. Converting the combination flux core and MIG welder is easy. This conversion kit comes with everything you'll need, except the refillable gas cylinder. First, take a look at the front of the welder. This diagram shows you how to reverse the plugs for MIG welding, just like this. From here, it's just like setting up the MIG welder. Attach the regulator and the gas cylinder. Make sure you check for leaks. Then install the wire. Remember to check the drive roller on the tension device. You'll need to reverse it. The smooth side of the roller is used for MIG welding. You may also need to change the contact tip on the torch. Make sure it's the same size as the wire. Then feed the wire. Set the gas flow, and finally tune the welder. Now you're converted to MIG welding.